to our first podcast. I am Michelle Reyes.
I'm Samantha Koval.
I'm Christine Hernandez.
I'm Anna Aranda.
So today we're going to talk about this book, this bridge called My Back. It is a lot of writings collected by radical women of color, and this is the 4th edition. It is by Cherríe, Moraga, and Gloria Anzaldúa. Today what we're going to focus on primarily will be on class, culture, and homophobia, and this is part of section 4. So throughout the book, what we talk a lot about is feminism and how it impacts different people, not just women, also men, not just white women, also women of color, not just the rich, it's also the poor, and it really incorporates all these different dynamics that impact our lives. And one of the most important things to know about this book is that the goal of the writers and the editors is to educate people of all backgrounds. So to educate women of color, to let them know that, our society has kind of separated us by like our background and cultures, and it's more about being inclusive, and also different people of different backgrounds when it comes to income and how we need to come together as a whole. And it started about 40 years ago, and it's really important that we all come together. One of the most important things that I think that stood out to me was the part about extreme feminism and radical feminism. So interestingly, I found this one image that really demonstrates these two opposites that are, still considered feminism. And on the image you see either feminismo or you see feminismo but radical. And in the radical portion you see like a woman with the woman symbol like chopping off the head of like a man. And that's like the radical way where people create this like opposites between females and males. And like the extreme feminism is understanding that we don't have to separate ourselves in that way, and it's more like the extreme feminism is understanding that we are all human and we all come together. And that is what stood out to this editor, that the writer of the book, in the introduction, that she was interested in feminism because of the human experience. And that's really important to know. It's us all being human and being able to interact together.
So how does feminism and identity work hand in hand?
Well, first and foremost, feminism and identity can be put together and correlated into gender oppression. And like in the book, it's lesbianism. And there was actually a quote that I really like in page 127 that says, "Lesbians have been forced to live between two cultures, both male-dominated, each of which has denied and endangered our existence." I really like this quote because it gives an understanding of both feminism, where women are fighting for their own rights, trying to get rid of that oppression against the male domination, but also when it comes to sexuality, those women that consider themselves lesbian are also oppressed by women that are straight, and also by that second culture, which is the male domination. Mm-hmm. So I think it plays a big role in how it comes into play with correlating feminism and homophobia and lesbianism and all the other oppression that comes into play.
Okay. I know also there's cultural identity spoken about in our books, in our section. What do you have to say about that?
In the book, it was called Whitewash of Cultural Identity, which it refers to when you're in different groups. So we'll say that you are in a group with your own ethnicity, your own gender, your own sexuality. You have this different way of being. You can say like you're more comfortable because they can understand who you are, how you feel comfortable, rather than if you are the minority in a different group, you lack that experience of wanting to show off what you really are, your own identity because of it.
How would you relate that to like just like general life, like even on campus, anything?
Well, let's say for fraternities and sororities, there's minority frats where it's African American, Latino, and there's the majority, which are all like the other frats, which are the Kappas, all the other, and it's majority white. So obviously they have different rituals where those in the minority frats have a different way of doing things rather than, we'll say, a white majority frat and you go into it being a minority. You have to change the way you are because you cannot identify the same way you would with your same race and ethnicity.
And I know you pulled out this image. What do you have to say about it?
Image is with one white man and African American woman where it's a race. There's a slogan saying, "What's the matter? It's the same distance." It is the same distance. However, in the left side, it's the man with no obstacles at all. Maybe one or two, but everything on the way is clear. Rather, on the other side, the woman has to deal with different struggles, many obstacle courses, and yet she has the weight on her foot, which can lead to, I believe, to conclude the oppression she has if she comes from low income, sexuality, which can be so many factors that weights on her more.
Okay, and I know, Sam, that you wanted to talk about education. How can we bring the ideas of feminism and identity into education?
I think education is really important to talk about as its own separate identity because education really allows someone to progress in their socioeconomic status. They're allowed to advance and become more than what their parents were, more than what their grandma was, more than the generations before them. And that's actually why I chose the picture, because it's just a little girl and she's just trying to escape her reality and search for something better, which is normally what a lot of people can run to is the education, reading, going further in life. There are few opportunities in order to advance in your lifetime, and education plays a really large role in just figuring out how are you going to make your life a better reality. And at the same time, it also shows the privilege. And in the book, it says race is a concept of having to be twice as qualified, twice as good, to go half as far. And that was from the sisters' talk with Bev. And she was just basically saying that her identity as identifying as a person of color and from a poor background, she wasn't allowed to get as many opportunities. And she just talked about any people of color who had less income than the normal white middle class family. She was people still worked hard in order to get where they had to go, and they relied more on books. So even if they didn't have a lot of monetary wealth, they spent the amount of money that they had on things that were needed in order to progress in a better life.
So would you say whitewash is found in education as well?
I believe that's true, just because even in every history book, it's normally whoever wins writes the history book. So in our history books, we're taught that America was founded by these white men who cultivated the fields, but they never talk about the rape, the pillaging, or anything like that until you get older, and then you have to realize everything you learned when you were little was a lie. And that also goes back to being superior in whoever wins gets this, and white people just have a more of a power that a lot of people don't have. So even with education, again, Bev talks about the downhill of how middle class white females want to just stop their education and pursue a family life, which is nothing wrong with starting a family, but at the same time they don't see that they're gonna miss out on an opportunity to go further. People of color don't have that privilege to just let me pause, let me start a family, and then let me go back to school, because at the end of the day, the resume will be the same. They'll still have to compete against someone who didn't go to school just because they're white.
So Michelle, how can we see feminism or use feminism for education and the privilege of education?
So in the book, it explained how sometimes people just make assumptions of education based on your background or the things. And like for feminism, it's about like being thoughtful, making sure that you take note of those assumptions that are made, and making sure that you include people of different colors. So being sure that you understand that people who haven't had the chance of an education have different struggles, different obstacles, and different reasons as to why they aren't educated, and just being aware of the differences and accepting.
Christine, I know you had mentioned before this the way could benefit of all of cultures coming together to create something special in the U.S. Can you talk a little about that?
I would say that it takes away from the different cultures and the variety of it, because we're coming together just to make one American culture, and you're taking away from all the Cubans or the Hispanics in general, any African Americans or of any different race. And I think the melting pot ideology can create racism and oppression. It just creates this back and forth racism, because those of the majority, the white people, the middle class people, and the upper class people look at those with the differences that are in lower classes or in different races or different genders, and different sexualities, and then there's racism towards them. And then you have the minorities racist against the majority because they're racist against them. It's just going back and forth. And it just creates this kind of superiority versus inferiority type of system. And it's just kind of like this type of ignorance is bliss, those who are the same woman who wrote I Pay Very Hard for My Immigrants talks about how she was just ignorant to the differences. She thought, what's the difference? We're all the same. Like we're all here as Americans getting the same thing, same education. And she got confronted by that, and they're like, "You're racist. That's not true." And she was ignorant to the fact that everybody is different, has different classes, have different races, and different religions and sexualities. And the minorities feel like they have to have this tie with the powerful. And this comes up twice in our section, where minorities feel like they need to have some type of networking or tie with the majority in order to be successful, which is not the case, like you said, because everybody should have an opportunity at education. So I think the biggest thing that most of the women in our section talks about is unity. There needs to be greater unity, and we need to look at feminism, and not just feminism, but all of us together should look through an intersectional lens. Different races, different cultures, different sexualities, and different religions, and we need to make the personal political, and we need to fight for the different obstacles that everybody's facing, and fight for each one together through feminism as a whole. A lot of the women are against separatism because all that solves is the fact that you're going to your own community of your whatever similarities you all have, and you're not really fighting for anything. You're staying in this mindset, well, if these people are going to cut me off, then I'm going to stay in this community. But overall, we should be fighting against this big system overall. So I think, just to conclude, that This Bridge Called My Back had this just beautiful ideology of unity, and aside from separatism, and bringing together a fight for lesbianism, fight against racism and oppression, and fighting for a better system in this country.
I agree.